Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our transit series. And I'm back this week with William Holloway, who's been on the podcast and over on the Coven before. But in case you're seeing a new face, welcome, William. It's so lovely to have you back.
Thank you for having me. It's always fun to be on here talking with you.
Yeah, and William does a great podcast called Orbitals. I've been on one of the episodes. I'm going to be on an episode soon, so you guys can go check that out. Where's the best place to find it?
Well, it's on all the major streaming platforms. And also if you follow me on anything, it's on my link tree. It's everywhere. It's all the
Cool.
places. Just type in Orbitals podcast and it does pop up.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So thank you for
Yay, it was. You were in
today.
the first episode.
Yeah, that's so exciting. So today we're going to be talking about the transit of Pluto square to Saturn. And if somebody has, as at the time we're recording this, Pluto in, or sorry, Saturn in Scorpio, that's kind of what we're looking at right now, as Pluto is in Aquarius, but maybe you have it in a different sign, you're watching it in the future. We're going to talk about what that means. So let's just kind of take it piece by piece. So, first and foremost, Pluto transits, kind of heavy. Uh,
Heavy. Yeah.
when you hear a Pluto square to Saturn, if that was happening for a client, what would you say are some things to look out for?
I would say something to look out for would be as Pluto being the planet is, or you could say that it's like creator and destroyer, and Saturn is our sense of responsibility, our structure, and all that. Your sense of responsibility is going to be tested. I think that's the broadest way. Um, One of the broader things I could say. More specifically, they're very different ways that could play out. So you could think about like your structure being your sense of structure or what you have created as your structure. Like, is that authentic to you? Does it make sense? Are you doing the job that you want to be doing? Are you working towards the goals that you want to be working towards? Or are you at a job, something that you might see, especially if you're in a career, you might find there are power dynamics related to boundaries happening there. You may also find that you're getting a lot of extra work. There's a lot of expectations on the line. Your job might be on the line. This might be the moment where you're like being really tested. Like, how much can you put up with, and should you put up with? So some of it might be this might be it's something I would say that might be that you don't hear every day would be, you might be put in a situation that might not you might fail at. It might be one of those things that like your situations where like there's not a way to really come through and you have to kind of take the lessons of the fail. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but sometimes that these are one of those moments where like we get some hard lessons, or we learn about our limitations, about what we can and can't put up with. So those are that's my ramble of some of the things I would bring up. Someone had this transit coming.
Yeah, when I think of Saturn, especially just happening in this particular time and place of us recording this, Saturn is government systems. It's what we have that's established, that's firm, and I foresee, as I'm sure you do, there is a breakdown happening as we speak right now with those systems. So like certain things might not be available to you. For people who, live on government assistance or government help. I know that this is a big fear a lot of people have right now. And I think that might be especially true if you have Saturn in a place like the sixth house, or where it is part of your everyday routine. You're going to want to really think about where Saturn is in your chart, and your relationship with Saturn. Like, what aspects is Saturn making natally? Do you have a strong Saturn? If someone has more of a strong Saturn, this might just be, a period of some testing, as you say, or maybe having to do things a little bit differently in how you structure your life. If you have Saturn issues, then there might be, a little bit of a need to kind of prepare for things to break down. But one thing I like to try to remember with Pluto transits is, and I've been through the worst of them. I've been through Pluto on my Mercury. They can be challenging, but I do feel that I've left my Pluto transits with a more empowered sense of self and more confident in who I am. So while things might fall away, I think things really do come together in the end, especially when you look at it from far away, maybe with some distance.
Yes, I've had some of the bigger and intense Pluto transits for sure. I mean, I've been on here talking about them.
Yeah.
And this is somewhat related to all of those. It was just like the tail end of a lot of those. So it's like a
Wow.
continuation of some of that stuff that I've talked about on here before. Um,
I want
but
to go check that out. We did an episode on Pluto conjunct the descendant with William. So if you have already been through that or you're going to go through that, really check that one out. That was a great episode.
was thanks. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And heavy, these Pluto things are heavy. But yeah, I would say that, and I think it's why, you know, Pluto is seen as so powerful, is because the the results of the Pluto transit are always so, you know, it's change. You transform. It's how we mature. It's how we grow. And both Pluto and Saturn are about growth, and they share some stuff in common. So um there's a death quality to both of them. Um and so yeah, it's like being really put to the test. I just think of like Pluto squaring Saturn is like being put to the test, um having some kind of obstacle in front of you that now you have to show your stuff. Like, can you, power through?
Yeah. Okay. So if you have a client who is about to face this transit, what are maybe two or three things you might recommend doing? Is there like a book that you think is really wonderful? Is there, a piece of advice, a film, anything and everything? Is there something you would
Yeah.
advise?
So something I would advise is to be familiar with your Saturn. Like you said earlier, where is your Saturn in your chart? Because Pluto is not only squaring, will not only be squaring Saturn, but Pluto's also squaring that house. So all the topics of the house that your Saturn is in are going to be on a bigger, there's a bigger story happening. So you want to think about about those. Like what about that house? Like, yeah, what about that house is asking to be um regenerated, or what about that house is looking to have the structure um kind of either recreated or re-examined. So I think that's something to start with, is to really figure out what your Saturn is. And what is your Saturn good at? Like what, because that's the thing, like all of our, our Saturn focus is going to be in different parts of our life, right? Like having Saturn in a certain sign doesn't mean that you're going to be really structured in all areas of life. You might be really just structured in like certain parts of your life. I know that's true for me. I have a lot of Virgo planets, but that doesn't mean that I'm super organized. I am very organized where all of those planets and my Saturn in Virgo is concerned.
Yeah.
Um, and then the fifth house. So all of my like hobbies and all my artistic endeavors have always been, very structured and organized, and I put a lot of care and methodical thought into these things. And so where are you putting where's your Saturn?
Yeah. So
um yeah
resourcefulness, like making maybe a list of the things that, if you foresee certain circumstances coming into your life, like where can you find resources? Where are you resourceful? For example, something I was a little nervous about approaching this transit was, SNAP benefits or Medicaid, all of
Mm.
things are on the line right now. My relationship with, I mean, I have it in my third house. It's my communications. So, I'm autistic and I tell people that, and I'm not ashamed of that. And I'm an advocate for that. But right now, it's a little bit of a frightening time to live in this period of time where they want to make lists of autistic people or registries. So, thinking about like these things, I've always felt very free to be who I am. I do have, Saturn ruling my sun and moon in Aquarius. And, I might not be able to do those types of things, but there was something about me going through this transit where I was like, do I want to live my life in secrecy in hopes that I make it through, or am I here to like truly be who I am? And so I was like, if these things happen, I feel like I've worked my magic like a muscle. I feel really firm in, I know that money magic isn't going to be the answer to everyone's problems. And sometimes it frankly doesn't work because we don't have the transits, we don't have the wishes that we want to happen. But I feel
Yeah.
pretty firm that like when I've needed help, that my guides were listening, and I feel a trust in that process. So, it has been this sort of like, I haven't even gone through it yet, but it's been like, understanding that I am a resourceful person has helped me with the anxiety that I feel about what could potentially happen. I think another thing is really, real, like embracing the deconstruction of that area of life. Like, what are the
Yeah.
things that you want to actually break down? For example, like in my case, it's in my third house. I'd love it if my sisters and I could go to therapy, and I believe that that would work. That's a Pluto thing, right? Like
Yeah.
that's going to happen. But but I can write a note, and that's something I love doing. That's really
Mhm.
simple, free magic, writing a letter to the planet that you want to work with and say,
Yes.
Pluto, I know you're going to come in, you're going to be the vampire, you're going to break things down. These are things I would like to break down, and I would actually like to reconstruct them in a way that they are more beneficial. If you're going to
Yeah.
take away SNAP benefits, well then give me good paying clients. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
me own my resourcefulness. So one thing I might recommend is starting if you don't already have a magical practice, maybe working with these two planets, working with Saturn, working with Pluto. Pluto's really easy to work with. He loves he'll work fast, and he will work thoroughly. You just need to put out a little chocolate. I always say when you're working with Pluto, it's like prepare for Pantera to come over. You want some ale, you want some good whiskey. Even mid-level whiskey is just fine, for him. Mid-level chocolate bar. Like I don't want to get like a Snickers. Maybe I'll get like a little bit of a fancier, like a $3 one. Like something
Yeah.
in mid-range. I'm trying. It's not just a Kit Kat. Um,
Yeah.
I'll put out chocolate cake if I have it. He likes things that are decadent. Um, and anything relating to Pluto, if you happen to have some diamonds, like if you happen to have jewelry that has diamonds in it,
Yeah.
things
Diamonds.
underground, working with Pluto's energy, creating an altar for him, and trusting that he's going to reconstruct things, I think is one way to work with. When it comes to Saturn, Saturn's a little bit more tricky. Saturn wants to see you doing the work. I
Mhm.
have like a beautiful timepiece on my Saturn altar, because Saturn rules time. So maybe like a watch, or um, I have my teeth from my when I went to the orthodontist as a kid. You know how they do the teeth molds
Yeah.
because Saturn rules teeth. I put my teeth there.
I love that.
Yeah. And that's actually another Saturn thing with you know, and this is like Saturn does rule the teeth, and with Pluto, I have been noticing some changes in my teeth.
Really
I might
interesting.
have to work on.
And what's gone?
A few years ago, I lost a tooth. I had to have it
Oh.
moved, and then I never. got like a replacement, and so my teeth are starting to move because
Oh,
and I'm so scared of the dentist. Like I am, I've had some really terrifying events at the dentist's office, like historically. So it's not something I like. But I did see
yeah.
online today. It was kind of weird, but they were advertising it as like sedation dentistry, where you can go and just be sedated. And I was like,
The
oh,
whole time.
God.
You're like, put me out, wake me up when it's over.
Yeah, for real. Because like the dentist is so scary.
I'm not a big fan of the dentist, but not because of that as much. My mother was a dental hygienist growing up, so I was around the dentist's office, but it was my awareness of how so many of them are kind of like scam artists.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I
sorry,
think it'd be-
I just
Also,
screamed in that.
when I think of dentists, I don't think of the most trauma informed people either.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Not the best bedside manner.
yeah, so keep an eye on your teeth, guys. That could also be, and your skin can also, Saturn is the skin, bone,
Hmm.
things like that. So these are also things I would definitely keep an eye on. I would not say that this is a great idea for, doing something or a great time for doing something adventurous, because I'm just
Yes.
seeing broken bone.
Yes, and I can attest to that. Do not get adventurous during this transit. Do not, do not. Um, yeah, because the thing is like I think a word that keeps coming up for me is survival, and like our survival skills, whatever, like our survival skills can range from like really, minuscule things to the basics of like how to survive in the wild. And I think that this transit can test our survival skills
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
definitely. I think also I would imagine like transits come through relationships a lot of times too. So
Hmm.
you might meet more platonic people in your workspace or, in the Saturn parts of your life. If Saturn's in the fourth house, maybe your family's going through some changes. Maybe, this is a relative,
A
you know,
father figure.
yeah, like maybe there's some so, like I'm almost imagining like somebody whose father might be struggling with like dementia. You get that angry kind of plutonic controlling kind of energy. I'm not saying this is
Yes.
going to happen to you guys, but just something to be aware of. So I think having boundaries in place, I put that on the list of advice, like being really
Yes.
strong and firm in your boundaries and who you are. I would say not to chase, not don't align yourself with a job or a place. Align yourself with a mission, I think is like a safe piece of advice. Like
Mhm.
really get clear about what your values are, what your boundaries are, and
Yes.
putting your energy towards those things rather than a structure. Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm glad you brought up values because I do think that that's something that could happen too. You can find I saw it written in the Ren Butler book. He said brutal and ruthless behaviors. And yeah, I mean, that's something to look out for, whether it's yourself or, finding yourself in the presence of people that are maybe ruthless, or have like a brutality about them, or just shady people, the underworld. Pluto brings out the underworld a bit, So yeah, like there's a test. There's something testing about a Pluto square Saturn transit. There's like a test element to it, I think.
Okay, so when we think about the archetype of Saturn in, well, I guess this would be in Scorpio for starting out,
Mhm.
maybe go into the future, but and Pluto in Aquarius, what kind of archetypes do you think could play out? And then maybe we'll look at Saturn into Sagittarius. Yeah, that would be the next one, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
that would be the next one. Okay, so
so. What kind of square? Like, okay, so I'll start
yeah.
off with. Uh, so I have a Saturn in Scorpio, and so yeah, Saturn for me has been about a lot of like power struggles, learning to use my own voice to break away from systems or ideologies that I grew up with that don't really align with who I am and who I've grown to be. Um, I have kind of an pretty like anarchistic, if you would say, kind of point of view when it comes towards government. I can be a little bit utopian in my beliefs. I don't love any of the things that are happening right now, where so many of our freedoms have been taken away or have the potential to be taken away. So I imagine that this is going to be a bit of a challenging time. Pluto in Aquarius, that's, the death, the rebirth of freedoms and anarchy and all of these independent type of themes, coming down on the Scorpio archetype. Now, keeping in mind that these are two fixed signs, so they don't really like to change either. And
Yeah.
there's some part of me that is aware that I'm going to have to get out of my comfort zone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because when you think about, I think about, yeah, like when you think of those two fixed energies, Aquarius and Scorpio, they operate very differently, right?
Yeah,
Like, um, I think of I think of Aquarius as like wanting to create new rules, wanting to create new ways of doing things. Sometimes those ways might come across as like like odd, I guess, or like not really like, is that really the way we want to do it? But that's the way you do it. Okay. Like, that can
yeah,
happen. So then like with Scorpio, um, it can, that you mix Scorpio can feel like Aquarius is a little cold. Yeah. So there's like a rubbing up of two different kind of identities a bit.
yeah. Like for me, like in my own life, I have, first of all, I have a stationary Saturn, so that kind of alters the story a little bit. But like, I've grown a lot in the last 10, 15 years. Like I am not, sometimes I look at the person that I used to be, or I just like, I don't align like with politically, mentally, belief wise, like none of it. And it's always funny, like, isn't there that Ram Dass quote where it's like, if you think that you're evolved, go home a week with your family or something like that?
Yeah.
Like, I have it in the third house, and it's hard because when I do go home for me is my siblings have like I don't have parents, so like my siblings have always they're 20 years older than me. They've always had to play that parental role.
Okay.
Um, yeah, like they will not change, and there's been like a pretty contentious power struggle over the last couple of years between us because
Mm,
I'm just like calling out the bullshit, and I'm standing up for myself. I'm getting boundaries. I know what I'm entitled to, and they just kind of in very Scorpio fashion would rather ignore me than face the truth. Um, so there's been a lot of like literal square downs, like, hey, you practice coercive control. That is abusive. I'm not going to do this anymore with you. Like, I'm an adult. You don't
yeah.
have the right to do that. That coercive control, that's a very Scorpio theme, right? Like, someone trying
Hmm.
to control your money, someone trying to control you and what you can do with your body. These are things that many of us are, especially women, and are having to deal with right now. And, you know, I feel like that's kind of be the deterioration of our relationship. And that's hard. There's moments where I have to grieve. Scorpio is death, and that's
Hmm.
really hard. And that might be part of the story in someone else's life too. There might be some grief in this process. It is Pluto, it is Scorpio. So that's hard to really that's hard. That's a hard thing to deal with. And one of the things that I think has really helped me is finding family in other places like friendships and in the astrology community and trying to build a network here and in through my work, literally what I do every day and how I speak. Um, Often, the kid that doesn't always feels kind of like a burden, he doesn't feel connected to family, they'll try to make the world their family, and that's kind of what I try to do. And I guess a key word for Saturn is seriousness, and so I've been taking that a little bit more seriously. So if you find yourself in these weird power battles and these places where people aren't unwilling to change, but you have, I just want to tell you, feel the feelings, don't detach from them. Like, feel all the feelings even though they suck. It's so important to feel those feelings, because otherwise they come up in these very subtle ways, right?
Yeah.
And so, but don't get lost in the feeling. Like, allow yourself a timer, like Saturn's boundaries timer, like,
Hmm.
I can listen to Fiona Apple's Never Is a Promise and I can cry, but only once. I can't, I can't, I can't be, I got to get out of the house. I got to take a nature walk. I got to take care of myself. And it's so easy, especially during a Pluto transit, to just sort of ruminate and sit in that. So I'd encourage you to like feel the feelings, but have some strong boundaries around them. Another thing I might say is like, think about where you experience plutonic issues in your life, and really, like, if it's in the fourth house, maybe you'll want to read psychology books on family, and restructuring what the boundaries look like and attachment looks like. If it's in your 10th house, maybe this is a good time to read The Art of War, and kind of learn how to maneuver in the public sphere.
Yeah.
Be afraid to dive into these resources that can help you wield your power in a more effective way, because you do have,
Yes.
even if it's being challenged,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah.
you have agency. I think that's such an important thing that we lose track of, is like, especially when everything sucks, we can feel really I mean, I've been in those places where I felt totally powerless to something, but it's so important to remember you have agency, because it isn't what's falling apart. It's about how you get yourself back up.
Yeah. And think about what helps you feel strong too, I think is a good remediator and as well. When I've had difficult Pluto transits and I'm like working out, I remember every time it's like I think I always, and it's not even, I don't even know if it's on purpose. I don't know what comes first, but I always visualize like kind of like standing on like the tip of like a volcano that's like very hot. That feels very
Yeah.
Pluto to me, you know? And just like standing there and like facing it, right? So like you're working out, whatever, riding the bike, running, lifting weights, and you're just kind of like pushing through it. And you're pushing through the Pluto shit. As well, right? So like I think there's very many ways to like to work through this and to visual, I think visualization is helpful.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
you know what I really love is the subliminals and the binaural beats. And there's so many crafty ones on YouTube. You got to find good ones, but I love working through, like, there's ones, if you're dealing with blocks, in your life during this, you can find one, remove blockages, remove entities, remove curses, whatever. And I just sometimes will just I usually sit in nature, and I'll usually just listen to them and just sort of, kind of imagine, like, as you say, like a white, for me, it's like a white light kind of clearing my energy and
Yeah.
listening to them. I fall asleep to them a lot, to the subliminals, and I really do feel like they help me quite a bit, especially the binaural beats. And then I love, her name is the Loon Innate on YouTube. She's a Reiki
Mm.
practitioner, but she does these Reiki style ASMR videos, and there's everything from, clearing blockages to cord cuttings to, if you need an amplification of your energy, it'll be like morning burst and Reiki, and I just find them so calming. Um,
Love that.
they always have, like, they're always in those kind of neon tones that's just very dreamy. Love it.
Mhm.
So those
Yeah.
type of things have been really helpful for me. I think also music is always helpful for me. And, if you're feeling disempowered, making up like something, making a playlist that reminds you that you have power. Like, I'm kind of a little bit of a music historian, so I like finding these like cultural moments where people might have felt powerless, or like,
Mm.
where they've created spaces out of nothing. So like, I was always, like, I was always into punk rock for that reason, because in its roots, it's in its origin, um, a lot of these bands, they really hailed from areas where, like, there was nothing culturally interesting happening at all. And
Right.
they sort of had to literally, create, build their own scenes, their own, ways of, you know, putting out their own, whether that's putting out their own records, starting their own record labels and creating business, like all of these Saturnine things, right? Like that's so interesting to me. And so it
Yeah.
reminds me that not only am I listening to something empowering, but I'm like remembering as I'm listening to it, well, Kathleen Hanna, when she was in college, like was repulsed by how she was at Evergreen State College, which was like supposed to be this liberal arts college, but it was misogynistic and like they treated women like garbage. They tried to like shut down her artwork. And so she created Reco Muse, which was um, for people who don't know, it was this art gallery because their work was banned by the campus. And so they came up with the name Reco Muse because they wanted to literally wreck down this idea of women being muses and claiming their place in the art world. And so it was mostly like this feminist art space. And then, of course, that little band Nirvana played, and they had a picture that was taken at Reco Muse, and that became the Bleach cover. And then suddenly the whole world knows what these little feminists were doing that they created out of nothing. So, like, there's a story in that, you know what I mean? That feels empowering. So, I like to remind myself of people who took their power back like that, and music,
Yeah.
for me, is one way. Maybe for you, it's film, like, finding
Hmm.
little, like I always think about like Kevin Smith is like the kind of the quintessential indie, like came from nothing, built this whole universe kind of thing.
Yeah. That's what I love all that. Yeah. Yeah, that's at the end of the day, this can be an extremely empowering moment in your life. And it should be. It doesn't mean it's going to be comfortable. It isn't, and that's okay. And that is okay. Like we need to have these moments. Um, and yeah, I mean, honestly, when I think to I mean, I was having my Saturn return at the same time when I had the Saturn or the Pluto square of my Saturn. And so I kind of look at that time all in one kind of encapsulation of like, this is when I really grew up, you
Yeah.
know? There was just a lot of things happening all at once that really like forced me to get it together. And I'm grateful for that time. It literally, and I think I've said this before with Pluto transits, it was like a lot of high highs and low lows, it was kind of like this plethora of
What kept
things.
you sane during that? Like what keep you like regulated in your body?
Well, I was working towards going back to school for the first time because after high school, I just like moved around and, sc- messed around from my 20s. I was, a big screw up and I loved having fun. I've got a fifth house stellium. Fun was always the most important thing to me for the longest time. Um, and so I was like approaching 30, so what was that? Yeah, I was 28, having my Saturn return. Um, and so I wanted to go back to school. So it was like the preparing for um and figuring out what I was going to do and the classes and how I needed to prepare and get like the financial aid and I did it all on my own and didn't really know what I was doing. I don't know that I did the best, I don't know if I made the best choices, but I figured it out and I found the school that I wanted to go to and all of this happened while I was having this transit. So it was difficult and I remember like driving in the car and screaming because I was like, I just want to go back to school. Why are you making this so difficult? That kind of thing. Um, but I just kept going, and I just really wanted to, I wanted to get a degree in something and I wanted to get a degree I wanted to go to art school and so I did. So, uh, yeah, painful, but got through it and yeah.
I love that. So brace for things to move slower than you might like. Maybe that's number,
Yes.
but work with it. Work at a new pace. Develop a new pace. Surround yourself with people who were able to take nothing and make it something. Like find those people in your life, whether they're artists, whether they're people in your life, like directly. Don't be afraid to, ask them for help, or if you do know them personally, can I pick your brain? How did you get from point A to point B? Recognize your innate value and your inner resources, and work on your boundaries. Are we missing anything?
Um, no, I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, yeah, boundaries, being tested, but yeah, this is a chance to really like show your resilience and to really kind of see what you're made of, you know. It's challenging, but it's a real power booster, I guess, is a way, it's a confidence booster. You're like, okay, I can do this. Um, yeah, that's what I think of.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think we kind of nailed it then today. And then working with Pluto again, like, building an altar for Pluto is helpful. Building an altar for Saturn is really helpful. Saturn wants you to do the work. I always say that Saturn is Red Foreman, if you watch that '70s show. Like, he loves his kid, but he wants to stick his foot up his ass, like,
Right.
fucking work. And so, yeah, be prepared for those types of people in your life to be like, but also advocate for yourself. Like if you need a little extra help, if you need a little extra time, like don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, like
Yes.
from pressure comes diamonds also as the reminder, with Saturn, right?
Yes.
So shine
Oh,
diamond.
yeah, shine bright like a diamond. Well, I have one more thing. Maybe you
Yeah,
might want to cut it out, but I just remembered that was an experience I had during this transit, which was
please share.
I had during this whole process of like trying to go back to school and all the things, I was working, because as I shared in previous videos, I in my 20s, I went through like a drug addiction phase, and then I went to rehab and I got myself together. So this was like, uh, I had been working a steady job for a while doing retail, and it was during this transit that I was asked to be the manager of the store. I didn't really get much of a raise, but it was really about like showing myself that I could be like take on that responsibility. Um, so I think that's another thing to be, and I kind of said that earlier, you might be asked to like
Take on more
show
responsibility.
take on more responsibilities and like, you know, um, for me, that's what I wanted. It worked for me. I needed that. I needed that structure, right? But I have seen in other cases, like sometimes, think of Pluto as like a power dynamic. So that's why it's always important to be mindful, like, do I want this extra responsibility? Or am I being like cornered into it, right? So that's important to look at.
Yeah. I think that this is a great time if like you are trying to make different moves in your life. Like we can sometimes find this like sweet synchronicity of like, yeah, everything's falling apart, but like it's so something else can come together.
Yeah.
That's just something I'm trying to be mindful of. I will tell you guys when this transit is eventually over. If I feel the same, we'll have to do an update.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think that this is a good place to be at. Saturn in Scorpio, Scorpio doesn't really like shy away from the dark stuff. And
Right.
so I'm mindful of that too, where you know you have a Scorpio archetype meeting up with another Scorpio archetype, right? So that could, for some people, be easier than if we had, a more chill kind of Saturn. If you have like a Saturn in Libra that wants everything to be hunky dory, you might have a little bit more of an issue there, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, you're already used to plutonic and the darker sides of life, so it might not be as intense as it could be for someone with a, like you said, a cheerier disposition.
I always Well, and if you're watching this, that means you probably have a Saturn in Scorpio. We'll have to update this in a few years, but I'm like, Lana Del Rey is going to have this going. And if she can make it through, I can too.
Absolutely.
So yeah, is there anything else we want to add on this? I feel like we swept through this really easily. This
I
is such
know we did. I know. I don't know. I feel like we've covered it all. Let me see. Uh, no, I think we covered it all. Yeah.
awesome. Well, maybe we'll have to like rectify and do this and like after the transit is over and see, what
Yeah,
could be. We'll have to do an update. If you guys would
I
like
would
to
love to.
comment down below.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, William, thanks again. You're going to come back. I know we
Yeah,
will see you again soon. Um,
absolutely.
but it's so lovely to have these conversations with you. So thank you for being part of our transit series. People, if you want to go follow William, why don't you give all your links, your website, all
Oh,
that?
yeah. My website is williamhollowayastrology.com. Holloway is Holloway. And there you can book readings with me. I just started offering an option to get a pre-recorded reading for children or babies. I found that's a service that people have asked for in the past, and I'm like, why don't I have this? Um,
That's so funny.
why?
I did that too recently too,
Oh,
and
really? Oh, interesting.
I did horoscopes for kids over on my coven. Oh my god!
I love that.
Anyway, continue. No, no, no.
Yeah. Well, it's just a great thing to have. And then, it's something that when they get older, I just love the idea of being able to read a chart and talk about all the possibilities that can come as opposed to things that have happened. So it's an
Yeah.
exciting,
As a kid, I didn't feel like people really, the adults in my life didn't really understand me. And I think that this is something I talk about a lot. Like, one of the most important things we can do as parents is make our children feel understood. It is at the root
yes.
of so much trauma. So, a reading is a lovely gateway. So, please go get a reading with William. I bet that that would be fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah, and then got my you can find my podcast on there. And I have a Substack, which at this point my all my energy's been going to the podcast, but I do share it from there. And
And you just
I'm
an episode on the Golden Girls.
yes, I we just recorded that last week and I put it out this morning. Yeah, the astrology of the Golden Girls. That was a lot of fun. And we're talking about doing a Buffy the Vampire Slayer one next.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well, guys, stay tuned for that. And go follow William on all the things. And we will be back soon with a new episode of the Transit series. We had last week we had cosmic cousins. Jeff
Mm.
came and spoke to us about Neptune's transit through the first house. So we are going to have some
Fun.
talk soon, and I'm looking forward to that. Maybe we'll have William back. Everyone,
Yeah.
have a great evening. Thank you so much for supporting.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.